And so back to that kind of like decision making mentality with this kind of like new perspective that I found over the years ever since I started with you, which literally shaped me. And so I kind of want to go back to that with this kind of new perspective and just make decisions in a better way.
All right, folks, welcome to another amazing episode of Undeniable One-on-One. This is a series dedicated to remote sales professionals where we break free from the generic one-size, boring, fits-all advice and training that's out there to really just showcase the power of personalized mentorship when someone knows you and they're giving advice for you, and especially some counterintuitive advice, which is what I'm known for. And we have a very, very special guest joining us again today, another alumni member, someone that I've known through UCM and also have had the privilege to meet in person. One thing that I really like about Ricky is his willingness to try new things, his adventurous personality, his pursuit. When he gets an idea, he just chases it down, and he doesn't fit the box of most remote salespeople. And it's been beautiful to see his relationship form with that he's not doing what you're supposed to do or what everybody else is doing, but he's carving his own path in this space. And I think that's such an important thing to show people in this industry, that you don't have to follow the leader, that you don't have to put the same amount of time in and find yourself in a path that you didn't choose for yourself, that this can be a vehicle. This doesn't have to be a 30-year career, but this can be a stepping stone to something greater, whether you're meeting people that inspire you or you're learning from the businesses that you're working with. There's so many opportunities in this industry, and it's really up to you to carve your own path. And so I'm really excited to have another UCM alumni in here. Ricky, great to see you, man. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, bro. Really excited. Yeah,
Beautiful.
always super happy to do one-on-ones with you because
Absolutely.
every time I talk to you, I get new wisdom and new downloads every single time. So,
Love it, man.
I,
So what do you got for me today? What kind of topic, question, challenge, what are you throwing my way?
man, I honestly I was thinking about this. I was like, what should I come that's going to be like valuable to me, of course, but also to other people. And I really just wanted to almost like go down to the basics again, almost like back to like just beginner's mind mentality. Like, um, if I was going to start again and do this, um, like how to actually like go about like making decisions in the right way. And because like this path kind of gave me the self-awareness of like this is actually who I am. I'm not the type of person that can just grind out like one sales role. Like I think there has to be a balance, of course, of focus, but also of knowing where the opportunity cost lies of like how to make decisions based on like who you are and try those new things, right?
I
And
love it.
I think that's kind of how this opened up for me, like where I'm at right now, where I'm still closing, but I also have like all these side plates,
Yeah.
then and I'm just and kind of like my brand is all over the place, or like my reputation of like, what are you doing, dude? Like all these people like ask me, what are you doing? And so the cool thing is that I'm still closing, um, but I don't really talk about that anymore, right?
Right.
Because it's more important for me to start like creating these little partnerships or these little
Right.
side quests, but at the same time it can get overwhelming.
Right.
And I'm still like teetering that line back and forth between like, is this worth pursuing or should I like say no to this?
Mm.
And so back to that kind of like decision making mentality, um, with this kind of like new perspective that I found over the years ever since I started with you, which literally shaped me. And so I kind of want to go back to that with this kind of new perspective and just like get just make decisions in a better way.
I'm glad. I'm glad. We haven't talked about decisions, but I think it's one of the most underrated skills. When we talk about, what are the skills necessary for success in remote sales, people will tell you discovery and active listening and objection handling, but by far not even close. There's no foreseeable second place. It's decision making. Decision making is the number one skill that you'll ever learn. And the
Mhm.
quality of your life will come down to your decisions. The quality of your relationships, the quality of your body and your health will come down to the decisions that you make. At the cornerstone of everything is decisions. And most people are flawed in their decision making. I mean, we're all flawed in our decision making. We have biases and we have emotions and we have the ups and downs and trials and tribulations of being a human. We don't understand ourselves. We lack awareness sometimes. You know, we have envy and greed and jealousy and all these reactions, and we never really take the time to develop and challenge the process. So it shows a lot of maturity that that is the focus right now, because there's so many things going on. And I think there's a couple things, right? One thing that I've been working on with students recently is the idea of and the value of devil's advocate. I think what happens so often is
Yeah.
we choose a side and then we look for evidence as to why that side is the best side. And that is a flawed process, right? And I think that, you know, it makes me think of like the art of debate, right? We think of debate now as two guys battling it out on social media, calling each other idiots. That is not classic debate. I don't think many people know this, but debate is, you know, you take two conflicting ideas, you shuffle them up, and you choose one side randomly. Whether or not you believe in that side, whether or not you think that side's right, your job is to make a valid argument. And I believe that this is something that we should bring into our decision-making process, right? Because as we start to get that momentum and excitement, our blinders come down, right? And we start to kind of have the honeymoon stage of business, where it's like you start calculating and it's basically like you can already feel the money hit your bank account and you're thinking like, oh, I'm going to be a millionaire. This is finally it. But after a few times, right, you start to notice and recognize that feeling again, and you start to question it. You start to think, well, maybe I've felt this before, and I was flawed and erred in thinking how great this would be, how easy it would be, how convenient it would be, you know, and there is a benefit to that excitement. There is a benefit to having that momentum and having that honeymoon stage, but it should be balanced. You can't lean on that. And, you know, you're at a point now, and I think every person gets to that point where the things that make you great can also be your demise. Right. I
Mhm.
know that for me, it was like I always had this tenacity and grit and hard work. And I remember a mentor sitting down with me and saying, like, those were all those were all and still are amazing qualities. You don't want to lose any of those things, but you have to understand the boat that you're in. And I was
Mhm.
thinking about it, and he explained that if you're in a one person boat and you row twice as fast, you'll go twice as fast. Right?
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, if you add 8 other rowers into that boat and you row twice as fast, you don't go twice as fast. And that was a great analogy for me to realize that the way I was doing things independently is not the way I should do things as a team. Right. And I realized that I have to delegate and I have to, you know, optimize and motivate and manage a team. And that's a different set of skills than, you know, an independent performer. Right. And I think it's the same thing here, is like looking at the qualities, like, you know, your desire for adventure and, you know, your agility and your motivation has always been amazing qualities, but sometimes it can get in the way of your decision making and your risk assessment and the
Yeah.
ability to overcommit to too many things, right? And then you go wide instead of deep,
Yeah.
right? And we understand this, right? So I think, you know, going back to the decision making, one of the cornerstones is to good decision making is you should be able to put the same amount of energy into proving yourself wrong as you do prove yourself right. Right.
Okay.
And so, like, when you get excited, let's say there's a new business opportunity and you start to feel yourself gravitate towards that, right? Like, that's what I call the dreamer, right? We're thinking about the money, we're thinking about the opportunity. This is incredible, it's exciting, right? And all of those things are good. Flush those out, give the dreamer the ability to dream, right? But you
Right.
also need the realist and the critic. You also need to play the other side, right? And so, the realist is, okay, well, based on any business, if this was as good as the dreamer thinks it is, then why isn't everybody doing this? Right? Like there has to be some pitfalls and challenges and difficulty. Now, that does that mean it's not a valid idea? No, of course not. That actually can make an argument for validity in that when something's difficult, it's rare that people rise to that standard. And because it's rare, it's also valuable. Right. So there's a
Mhm.
benefit there. But then to the other side, right, it's like being able to balance your critic, right? Your dreamer has been to the gym, right? It's been working out. It's strong. I've seen it in you,
Yeah.
right? You can take a little seed and you can build a big idea out of it like that. And that's a great benefit. That's an innovator. That's a dreamer, and the world needs those, right? But we need to also anchor. We also need to develop principles. We also need to be able to see conflict. And I think for a lot of dreamers, we see the critic as kind of this party pooper, right? As this person of like, well, that's boring
Right.
and that's, they're there to shit on my plans. It couldn't be further from the opposite. The critic is the dreamer's best friend because they're there not to cancel the plans, not to take away, but to actually fortify the plans and make sure that the dreamer gets to live their dream as a reality, right? And so it's being able to take that other side and say, how much intensity and focus did I put into the dream side? Now let's play the devil's advocate a bit, right? What could go wrong, right? What might happen? What is likely? What are the likely problems to incur? Because as you know, there's not an opportunity that doesn't come with problems, right? Like when you
Right.
start your entrepreneurial journey, you realize that, entrepreneurial and problem solver are interchangeable words, that most of your day is not, you know, like in business suits having lunches with stars and other rich people. It's you basically put a fire hat on and you're putting out fires all day, right? And so understanding that any venture is going to have a significant amount of problems, and as you solve those problems, that's where the reward comes in. Well, let's
Right.
anticipate some of these problems, right? What could go wrong? And
Yeah.
then what I'm doing as far as my allocation of resources is not how many solutions can I take on, it's how many problems can I take on, right? Because, as you
Right.
know, when you say yes to something, you say no to everything in that place. And so you want to have enough allocation for your personal life and your relationships and ventures outside of business, right? And what we tend to do is only plan for the execution of the solution of the ideas of the pursuit, and then
Right.
we fill that tank up fully, and then all the problems come in and we don't have enough time or energy and we start dropping off, right? It's the same thing with taking on multiple offers, right? It's like, oh yeah, it's only 15 calls, so you think 15 hours, but then there's admin and there's extra calls and there's team meetings and this, and so if you allocated 15 hours and there's 25 hours in there, you can't take on 3 opportunities, right?
Right. Yep.
So
Exactly. I've been thinking a lot about that, like strong arming. Uh,
hmm.
I learned that. I didn't know that was an actual term, like strong arming your argument.
Right.
And now I've been thinking about that. It's like like how can I strong arm this decision?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Because, two things are going to happen, right? If you think you're making the best decision, which should be your goal, right? Your goal should always to be making optimal decisions, right? So if your goal is to make an optimal decision, well, one of two things is going to happen. If you make a valid argument on the other side and your belief and your decision holds up, then that strengthens conviction in your decision, right?
Oh,
If you
yeah.
make a valid argument and you do your best, you put all the energy into making, the alternative argument and your decision still holds up, that should lead to confidence and conviction, right?
Yeah.
Now, if it doesn't, then you have
Mm-hmm.
to ask yourself, what am I here to do? Right? Am I here to make the decision that I want to make, or am I here to make the best decision possible? Because, you know, your quality of your life is not based on your desires, it's based on the quality of your decisions, right? So
Right.
it's, do I want to make quality, or do I want to make decisions that make me feel good, right? Am I basing this on emotion, right? And
Yeah.
so The other thing that I think is really important is like going back through again, like the mistakes are heavy, right? Like, I don't
Right.
think people say mistakes are valuable. I don't think the mistake itself is valuable. And a lot of people carry their mistake, right? And I look at it like you're on a climb right now, like you're trying to get to a higher elevation, right? So
Yeah.
imagine if I came to you and you're like, Ricky, why do you have this 50-pound bag? Why do you have a 50-pound weight in your bag? Right? Like, doesn't make any sense, right? And
Right.
especially you're panting and you're tired and you're like, I don't know why this climb is so hard and it's taking so long. I'm like, drop the dead weight, right? So part of that process for me is turning those mistakes, right, into reflections and experiences and taking from that what's valuable, which is the wisdom, the principles, the lessons.
Mhm.
Lessons are light and they're versatile. You can use them in different situations. You can use, lessons that you've learned in relationships with business, and lessons you've learned in sales, in entrepreneurship, and lessons you learned in your fitness journey, right? In your health and well-being and happiness journey. Those are versatile. That's like a Swiss Army knife. It's light and it has a lot of uses. The mistakes, right, weigh you down with guilt and shame and judgment and lack of confidence. So I think the other part of improving your decision making is having a process for reflection where you
Right.
extract what you're going to use. So when you are surprised by something, there's kind of two sides. One, I used to do this in sales and I've carried it over to this business as well, but predictions, right? Because we have something called the confirmation bias. You've probably said this before, but like, oh, I knew that was going to happen. But
Uh-huh.
that's a bias, which is just a flaw in our judgment and an error in our decision making. But what that is you considered that as one of the options, and then when it happens, you act like you knew that was going to happen. But what you
Right.
did was knew that that was one of the possibilities, right? So what's important is as you're making decisions, what you can do is start making predictions, right? So I predict these problems. I predict this much growth. I predict by month 6, this is going to happen. I predict we're going to have our first client in the first 30 days. And you make predictions, and that's based on accuracy, right? Because, I was just
Got it.
talking to someone about, you know, the problem in basing goals on accuracy is they're not inspirational. They don't give you that extra fuel. What I do
Right.
instead is I use my goals to inspire action and urgency and motivation, and I get excited. The dreamer taps in, and my goals are exciting. But I also want to make predictions, right? So this is what I'm working towards, but based on all the data, this is what's likely to happen. So as I make those predictions and I take time to reflect, now I have like real live data. I can't shy away from it. I can't hide. And I can say, okay, I predicted that I would be making 75K a month by now. I'm making 35 or 45K. What do I think the gap was? What did I not anticipate? And now all of a sudden, this experience becomes so much more valuable because you can't hide from the predictions and you can see your thought process was flawed, right? So I think adding predictions over and above your goals to what you think is likely to happen.
Dude, that's that's it right there, man. Like I feel like I'm so feel based and
Yeah.
actually like my personality, like yeah, I know ENFJ
Yeah.
and it's all feel based. I'm just fully intuitive, just like I feel this is gonna happen. And I already knew I was like I was becoming self-aware of this. I was like, there's like a certain level of clarity that I don't have when I do something that other people I feel like are in a I've met like different people and they're like very technical. They plan out and I really struggle with that. I struggle to
Right.
like get details like in the future. I'm like, it's like I'm gonna plan this out and I start journaling. I'm like 3 steps. It's
Mm-hmm.
like not detailed. I really struggle with that
Right.
level of clarity. And I think
But yeah,
the
think about it. Think
yeah,
about it like exercise, right? Like
yeah,
we're all drawn to a certain exercise, right? Like you see those big barrel chested guys and they can bench the world, right? And then you
yeah,
look down, they got like little chicken legs, right? Like if they started now working their legs, right? Like they'd be like, oh, this is this is a waste of time. Like, I can't do it. I can only do 3 reps, or I can only do this weight. And what they do is they go back to what is known and comfortable. But if you think about it like the physical realm, like, you've been exercising this dreamer and this intuition. So it's, yes, there is a natural tendency towards that as part of your personality, but it's
Yeah.
also like the tendency, right,
Yeah.
taken to the 10th degree because you've trained it and you've developed it and you've leaned on it. So it's stronger. And if you go in to the technical side or the logical side or the analytical side or the critical side, and you expect it to have the same strength and meaning and impact as this other side, that is like working out one arm for 10 years and then going to lift weights with the other one and being like, hey, this isn't as strong, right? So
Right.
what you want to do, there's a couple of things you can do. One, you can
Yeah.
outsource, right? You can have
Yeah.
a
True.
strategic alliance or a mastermind or people in your corner, and you can share your attributes with them about dreaming and brainstorming and big picture ideas, and they can share the analytical side with you. You can also create
Hmm.
exercises and kind of processes that allow you like a strength training of your analytical or critical mind. It can be developed. It doesn't mean that it's ever going to be your superpower. It doesn't need to be. But what it can't be is in a deficit, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can't have certain muscles in a deficit, right? And that's what I'm realizing now is, when I'm not a very organized person. That was not a natural tendency for me. I'm also a feeler and a vibe
Huh.
person, right? And so what I realized is I was trying to become the most organized person, and the amount of effort and resistance to it was like, no, what I need to be is in a place where organization is never a deficit. It never takes away from my other qualities. So you're never going to be the most analytical, critical person, nor should you be. That would get in the way, and it's not a good allocation of resources, right? Just like,
Got it.
the people who love bench press or the bodybuilders don't need to be the most flexible person on the planet, but it should never be in a deficit, right? So going through and thinking like, what is the minimum viable that I can do so that I don't need to spend 10 hours in critic because it brings me down. I want that momentum, but if it's
Yeah.
affecting my ability to pursue my dream, now I have to address it. So either what are the exercises, or who are the people, or what are the principles, or what is the algorithm, right? Instead of like trying to
Yeah.
do it yourself, right? Like, find someone who is a good critic and get them to give you a list of questions, or use chat GPT or AI, or develop a process where you're basically walked through it because your brain doesn't naturally think that way. So
That's
get the
so good.
guidelines and the rules and then fill out those answers, right? But do it to a minimum place where it's no longer a deficit, where
Mm-hmm.
now you get to use, like, the beautiful thing is you get to use the dreamer to come up with solutions to those problems, right? And you
Right.
go back and forth, like, your
Yeah.
dreamer will be happier because it gets to pursue, right? So lean on the dreamer, but bring up the realist and the critic to no longer a deficit.
Right. Right.
Yeah, that's
Dude.
it.
Yeah, man, I didn't know what was gonna come from this, but I'm so glad I did this, man.
Oh, I'm glad, man. No, it's
Dude.
amazing to see. I feel a lot of similarities, and I feel like you
Yeah.
have, probably that you're a little bit younger than me too, so you probably have a little bit more energy and a little bit broader focus. But the pursuit, like, when you find that thing, you're gonna hit, but you just have to now balance the other thing. You have to think about allocation of resources, and for me, I think thinking about it like the physical realm, because it's harder to ignore that, in that there's width and there's depth, but it's very hard. Or another example I use is like, I don't know if you play video games, but and I haven't played in years and years and years, probably like PlayStation 1, but
Yeah.
you could build like a character in like NBA or football or hockey, and
Yeah.
you would have a certain amount of attributes, right? And so
Right.
you couldn't have 100% skater, 100% passer, shooter, agility, toughness. You had to allocate those resources. And I think we're
Right.
not great at allocating the resources, and that, you know, I think it helps to break down of like, okay, after my core competencies, after the things that I cannot sacrifice, right? Like my fitness and my relationships and work and all of these things, what's left over, right?
Mhm.
And putting a percentage on that. So let's say after everything's done, I have, maybe 30 hours a week extra. Well, what I do is I would turn that into 100%, right? Like I have 30 hours additional, and that's 100%, right? And so when something comes up and it's 15 hours a week, I have to look at like, am I
Mm.
willing to allocate 50% of this additional time to that? Is that a worthwhile investment, right?
Mhm.
Thinking about that allocation of resources. And again, as I start, because this is not to get too deep into it, but thinking about like offer selection. A lot of people are against multiple offers. That was the key to the longevity of my career and making $40,000 a month consistently. But the problem is people get a job, right? And they're like, okay, I want to get another job to make more money, but they're not thinking about allocation of resources. If I want to work 50 hours and I get a job that's 40 and I go get another job that's, you know, 30 or 40, that's the percentage is too high. I can't allocate more than 100%. Right. And so what I used to do is I think, okay, well, I want to work about 45, 50 hours a week. Right. So that's 100%. Now, if I'm working 30 hours in this current job, I only have 20 hours to allocate. So instead
Right.
of taking a job and accepting it, I'm going to go out and trade that 20 hours. I'm going to go sell that 20 hours. I'm going to kind of brokerage it. Right. And so it's the
Yeah.
same thing here, in that you have to look and say, what do each of these opportunities take? And maybe I'm involved in it, but I'm outsourcing it because I
Yeah.
want other people to do it. But I can't go
Yeah.
above 100%.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah,
Man,
that's it. Yeah, and I
that's,
think
that's yeah.
last thing is just,
Yeah.
the thing that you want to improve, I think you're focusing on the right thing, which is decision making. It's the foundation, it's the core. You're
Yeah.
getting back to the basics. You've expanded, right? Like life is
Yeah.
a sequence of expansions and contractions. And I think you're in a contraction mode where you've
Yeah.
expanded your experience, right? But you need to tighten it up, right? And then once you get tight, you'll expand again, right? It's the
Yeah.
same in sales, it's the same in learning, it's the same in everything. So you're in this contraction mode, right? Where decision making, just bringing it to the surface, just being mindful of the decisions you're making. Just like, we're never going to remove biases fully, right? We're all flawed and erred in our decision making, but just
Mhm.
being able to learn about the biases, and oh, that's confirmation bias, or oh, that's,
Right.
like a coin flips 50 times in a row, right? And 50 times it's heads. We think that it has to be tails. We think that the odds of the next flip are in our favor, right? And understanding that that is a bias, right? And
Right.
like, oh, someone who I don't like gives me good advice, and someone I like gives me the same advice, I'm more likely to listen to this person. That's a bias, right? So I
Right.
think
Right.
you're tracking your decisions, bringing them to your awareness, slowing down, right? Making those predictions, developing more of a systematic process for weighing the pros and cons, learning more about decision making, looking historically at great decisions, looking at in the past of your own poor decisions or suboptimal decisions, just bringing it more to the surface. That in itself, without developing any further strategies, will pay dividends, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it, man. I love it.
Dude. Yeah, man. I love it, man. Yeah. I almost feel like whenever you're mentioning the dreamer and the critic, it's like writing with my right hand versus my left hand. Like
Right.
they're just I just can't get it to do what I want. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But it's, again, it's the body and mind are incredible systems, in that if you lost the ability to use your right hand, right? Or some of those people that have lost
Mm.
limbs or lost both arms, right? Like at first it's awkward and uncomfortable, but then you see like there's videos of of a woman that's brushing her teeth and making lunch with her feet and like taking care of a child with only the use of her feet, right? And so the beautiful thing about this, and you've experienced this in your fitness and in anything, right? Like we tend to react to the discomfort by removing it and putting it back and putting that limitation. But if we stayed, right, like if I said you can only use your left hand to write, at first you'd be like, I can't. But what's going to happen is your body and brain is going to adjust, because again, it doesn't like discomfort. What
Yeah.
happens is, again, and I kind of, for me, this reminds me of the sauna, right? Like there's a point in the sauna where my brain is like, whoa, this is not good. Like you're going to heat. And I understand it, but I also understand that I have a stronger gap. Like when it tells me, I still have about 40%, right? So I stay in the pocket. It's the same thing if you go for a run for the first time in 5 years, right? Your body's going to be like, don't do that again. But if you keep doing it, the body and brain is like, okay, this guy's crazy. He's not going to adjust. I'm going to adjust to it. So if you're
Yeah.
running, it's going to change the way your blood pumps. It's going to change the way your oxygen hits your lungs. If you're writing, your coordination is going to get better, right? If you're doing squats, your legs are going to get stronger. If you're in the sauna, you're going to feel more comfortable longer because your brain is saying, I'm going to make the adjustment, right? So when you're having those experiences, right, just add that ... yet, right? Like I can't do this yet. And what I'm
Right.
going to do,
Yeah.
like training wheels, right, is instead of relying on the effort of figuring it out myself, what I'm going to find is a model, or I'm going to fill out some questions, or maybe I'm going to, like, again, use a tool of like someone who has a critic, give me 5 or 6 questions. And now all of a sudden it's more structured. And as I do it more, as I exercise that part of my brain more, it will develop. Never to the mark of your dreamer, but
Mhm.
to a point where it's no longer a deficiency.
Right. Yeah. And and question for you, as you've developed your critic, because you feel like you're similar to being a dreamer. Like, what are some of the questions, or like what are some of the like tactical things that you've done to develop the critic?
Yeah, so I think one, talking to a lot of critics, talking to people who have developed that, right? Running an idea by someone that I think is probably going to be more critical. And I
Mm.
think, like, just staying in the pocket, one, it helps me to find people that have done this before. And two, it's just bringing the awareness that, okay, historically, I overestimate things. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's
That,
just say that, like, I've 2x the potential, right? Like I've done this before with kind of 30, 60, 90-day goals. And then the predictions of like, well, historically, how bullish am I on an idea, right? And so looking at the past, I think things are going to be 3 times bigger and take half as long, right?
uh,
So
uh,
based on that, like, okay, would this be worth it if it took 3 times longer? Would it be worth it if, it was half as half as good, or whatever the criteria is, right? Just breaking that down into, you know I know myself and I know I'm overestimating, so just bringing that awareness of like, okay, well, what if it was 50% or 20%, or what if there was, it took twice as long or took twice as much as my time, or what if, 2 years from now I'm still working on this, when would be the point it's no longer worth it, right? Like just
yeah.
being able to play in that and basing it off your past experiences, right? And going through those decision making questions, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect.
Love it,
Dude,
man.
amazing, dude.
I appreciate it.
Wow.
Awesome, man. Like I said, it's been an honor to be a part of your journey, and I feel like we're just beginning, and I can't wait to be a part of the next chapter and see what you do next, man. But thanks again. I think this is a really important topic for people. We get caught up in the remote sales game and the objection handling and the word tracks, but those foundational skills will make you better at sales, but they'll also give you longevity and impact in every other aspect of your life. So really appreciate you, man.
Yeah. Thank you, man. Thanks so much.
You bet. All right, that's it. I want to thank you for watching today, and I hope you received some value from this training session. Make sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell icon to be notified when we release the next training session. If you would like to be featured on a future training session, make sure to join our remote sales community on Facebook. I'll leave a link in the description. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover on a future training session, just leave a comment below. Appreciate you. Onwards and upwards.